Welcome back everybody to linuxacademy.com. My name is Terry, and in today's course we continue our preparation for the Linux Foundation Certified System Administrator. So we have our virtual machine up that we've installed, which is our CentOS, or rather, our Ubuntu 14.04 LTS system. I've actually off camera gone ahead and installed all of the updates on it just so that we've got the latest kernel. Not that that was imperative to the rest of our course. But there's a couple of things that we want to talk about. We're going to take two tracks. The first track is we're going to talk about how to start, stop, and modify the status of our virtual machine and how to access the VM console. And there's two ways to do it. The first way, which we're going to do in this video, is we're going to look at the GUI, the virtual manager that we're looking at here. And I'm going to go over how to do those various things, starting and stopping, managing the state of it, accessing the VM console. And then in the second video, I'm going to do the same things. However, we're going to do it at the command line. So the command line will be how we access those things. We'll actually go ahead and throw in how to configure the system to launch a virtual machine at boot. So the first thing is the VM console. The VM console is exactly what you're looking at here. So accessing the VM console is as easy as starting the virtual manager as we've done, picking a running virtual machine or a stopped virtual machine and then starting it, and then using this console to connect to that running system. That running system can be Windows, it can be Linux, and it can be a command line or a GUI. So in other words, we could be just at a shell prompt running a minimal version of Linux that doesn't have a desktop, or in this case, we're running the full version of the Ubuntu 14.04 LTS desktop for Unity. So as far as the VM console, that's all there is to this. Now, managing the state of the machine can be done from within the virtual machine itself. We can suspend, shut down, or restart the system as part of the virtual machine. We can shut down the system right here by clicking on the shut down the virtual machine. And then consequently, we can start up that virtual machine once it's been shut down. We can also pause the virtual machine. So for example, if I was using a virtual machine and I didn't want the CPU to be tied up if it was no longer needed, if I only used it under certain circumstances, I could pause the virtual machine, which will keep the state and the powered on state of the machine in place without me having to tie up my CPU. Now, my memory footprint, at least utilized memory to maintain the image, will continue to be used and tied up as part of that process. But for example, if I was doing something CPU intensive that I wanted to pause, which would take away from the overall ability of my system to do other CPU related tasks, I could pause the virtual machine and keep it from doing so. In addition, I have a couple of other states that I can do. I can force it to reboot from here. I can shut it down. And these use what are called the ACPI calls. This is no different than typing reboot or shutdown -H at a command prompt. It will attempt to interact with the virtual machine itself and to cleanly reboot or shut down that system. However, there may be situations that necessitate you to force a reset. So it's kind of like pressing the reset switch on a physical machine or trying a Control-Alt-Delete, although that's more ACPI as well, or force off, which is effectively hitting the power button. So it allows us to interact with what's called the state of the virtual machine just by a couple of choices from within a dropdown. Now, if I want information on my virtual machine, this will tell me all of the different settings that are currently running on my virtual machine. I get things like an overview of what my system is. I can also add information about title and details of a description. It'll tell me the performance, the processor type. We've got 2 CPUs, how much memory we have, what our boot options are. We're starting off the hard drive first. We can start off the NIC, etc. And it gives me all of this information about my running virtual machine. And I have the ability also to add hardware, and I can add any of these items if I have a driver for it or a need to have a virtual device that I can attach to my virtual machine. Now, if I come back over here to my graphical console and I go ahead and let's try to shut down the system here. Let's just go down inside the OS and we'll hit shutdown. And we'll wait for the system to power down. Now, once the system is powered down, then what I should be able to do is go to the View Manager, come back over here to my virtual machine, right-click it, and I could click Run or Open, which will open the virtual machine manager, so it's again attaching to the console that I can then go ahead and power on. Now, one of the items that I can do once my system is powered off, if I go back to the settings, I can set the auto start, starting the virtual machine on host boot up. And that's all there is to this. That means that as part of the virtual startup process, then loading the KVM kernel modules and the KVM processes itself, it'll attempt to start the virtual machine on host startup. The only thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that your libvirtd has been turned on. Now, by default on most systems, that should be the case. So what we want to do is we want to say sudo systemctl status on libvirtd. Now, libvirtd on Ubuntu is not necessary, and it won't be running, but on CentOS, some versions of CentOS, particularly non-systemd systems, sysvinit, you'll see the libvirtd system, and you'll want to do a check config or a system control status if you happen to be running one that does have libvirtd. Just make sure that if you do have that service that it's started, so that it will actually start the VM on boot. So we could do, for example, sudo systemctl enable libvirtd, and if we hit it, it would enable the libvirtd service. In this case, again, we're running on Ubuntu, so we don't have to worry about that here. But if I were to reboot my system now, it would say start the virtual machine on host boot up, and as soon as it started my virtual machine, or as soon as it started my physical host, my virtual host would start as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and uncheck this so that we don't have any changes made, because in the next video I'm going to show you everything that we just did here. I'm going to show you at the command line how to start and stop it, and how to set it for auto start, as well as how to attach to the VM console itself. So if we come back over here and we go to View Manager, we see that we have these things running, and we're going to go ahead and close those, and we'll learn how to do it at the command line in our next video. But for using the Virtual Manager to work with the state of our virtual machine, access the console, and set the virtual machine to start on reboot, that's all there is to it. My name is Terry for Linux Academy.